Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the RockyTerrain podcast. We're recording today on the 9th December 2020. I'm Thomas, and with me as always is Dennis.
Hey guys.
So for today's episode, we have something maybe a bit more special planned. We actually both watched a movie for today, which is based on geoscience, so an action movie that is based on geoscience. And we later want to debate the movie, we want to debate the science, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think this is a very cool idea.
Yeah, it's something different at least, and
yeah,
it's the end of the year, and maybe it's time to just do something you don't really have to do that much research for, just something you can lean back and think about.
Yeah, because we're lazy.
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
This is also the episode before the last episode of 2020. So the next episode will already be the last one for this year. For that episode, we also planned kind of a special thing. We want to talk about our year 2020. It was a special year in many regards. And yeah, I guess there are some things that we can discuss about that and talk about.
Yeah, just exchanging some thoughts about this year, talking about experiences we made, coming back to this principle that we would like to give a student perspective on geoscience. Yeah, and we'll just see. We don't really have a true plan what exactly we're going to talk about. This is just going to be pretty free us speaking freely, I guess. Jesus.
Yeah, I guess that's enough for organization for today.
Yep.
And let's get right into the podcast. Is there something new happening for you, Dennis?
Yeah, so not too much new stuff. Actually, not really much at all. I would like to mention a book which has been released currently, which is the Europasaurus graphic novel, which was authored by Joshua Knüppe and Oliver Winks. It's a book, as the title already says, it's a graphic novel, so every page includes artworks. There is a little story told of a dinosaur living on German Jurassic Islands. And the animals shown, the animals in question, they are based on finds in the so-called Langenberg quarry. So it's basically a try to communicate what animals lived in Germany in the Jurassic. And so far, I think it's pretty cool. The artworks are pretty nice.
Yeah, the
so
images you sent me, they look really good.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a nice way to communicate these findings, because it's not really a textbook. It's mostly artworks with this little story told, and then there's a little science part at the end of the book explaining in very, very simple language what the finds are and why certain animals were reconstructed a certain way. But it's, as I said, pretty well written, pretty simply written, so everybody can understand it. And I think it's a good way for people who don't like textbooks that much to still communicate this knowledge to them. Yeah, and lastly,
and also maybe not in the sorry.
No,
it's
it's
and
okay.
Also maybe not in the field and
yeah,
just
exactly.
interested in dinosaurs.
Exactly, it's just something you can pick up, and I mean, even if you're not truly into paleontology or something like that, you could read through it in 1 or 2 hours, I would say. If you still pay attention to the artworks, that is. Yeah, but the only other thing I wanted to mention is a little follow-up, because I screwed up at one point in the last episode.
As always.
Yeah, I I keep trying to do things right, but I fail miserably every time. Yeah, at one point we were having a discussion about animal names, and especially the names of Archaeopteryx and T-Rex. And I screwed up because I said that T-Rex T-Rex remains have been found before the remains that would eventually be named Tyrannosaurus Rex, but these remains came from the same genus, came from T-Rex. It's just that it was that these remains were named differently before, and usually in paleontology or in zoology in general, there is the rule of priority. So whatever was the first name christened for a particular species, genus, is the one that has to be used. So if two names have been given to the same animal, to remains of the same genus, usually the first one would have to be the one that sticks. And I said that this first name for T-Rex would have been Massospondylus, which is wrong, and I should have known that this is wrong because Massospondylus is a sauropodomorph, so an early relative of the long-necked dinosaurs. Actually, there have been two names for Tyrannosaurus rex remains before, but one of them sounds pretty similar, which is Monospondylus gigas, which was given to remains by Cope, but he thought it was a ceratopsid remains. But then these remains were later re-identified as theropod remains. But it was just based on a very, very badly preserved vertebra, so it's never a good idea to base a genus on very isolated remains, and this was the case here. And the second name christened for Tyrannosaurus remains was Dynamosaurus imperiosus, which is a pretty cool name as well. Yeah. This name was given to this animal by Osborn, the man who also named Tyrannosaurus rex. And he later corrected this mistake himself. He later referred this material over to Tyrannosaurus rex. And the interesting thing here is that Monospondylus gigas didn't fall under the rule of priority, because there are exceptions. And one exception is that if a name is, I think, more than 50 years old and the other name, the second name given to a certain genus, has been used in the literature very, very, very frequently. I mean, the name Tyrannosaurus rex, the literature is plastered with this name. And nobody ever truly used the name Monospondylus gigas, so yeah, in this case, an exception was made. And in the case of the other name, Dynamosaurus, it was actually the case that, page numbers were the deciding factor. The name Dynamosaurus, these remains were described on a later page. Therefore, T-Rex was mentioned first, and that was the name that was valid. And I don't know, it's just a very trivial thing, but I just find that story pretty interesting. I mean, I hope this was easy to follow, but yeah, I think it's a kind of funny story. And the interesting thing is that another Tyrannosaurid has been named Dynamoptera dynastes, honoring this name Dynamosaurus later on by MacDonald et al. In 2018. But that's about everything I have to say in terms of new things.
All right.
So then, Thomas, what's going on in your life currently? And in the world of planetary sciences, for that matter.
Yeah, so also for like my personal life, at least like regarding university. So things I want to talk about in the podcast. There's also nothing really new. I'm currently still writing on a paper about my bachelor thesis. And I'm now also writing on an abstract for the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in 2021. So I should have already attended this conference this year, but then COVID came, so that didn't work out. So yeah, I'm trying to write also an abstract for the conference in 2021. Besides that, like, at least from the university side, there's nothing really happening for me. It's kind of like this COVID lockdown life, I guess. Yeah. I mean, today, or not tomorrow, Cyberpunk is going to be released. Which I also already have preloaded and actually want to play after the podcast. Going to be a long night. But first is the morning where I don't have to get up early, so.
Oh yeah, then that's great.
Yeah, so that's enough for me. I think let's switch into the planetary science part. There's some news and some follow-ups, updates I want to give from last time. So last episode I talked about the Chang'e 5 mission. And I introduced you to the mission profile and to the mission itself. And since then, a lot of things happened. It's a very quick mission. We have already landed on the moon on December 1st. And then just after 2 days, on December 3rd, they already lifted off again from the surface. So this was really just landing, taking the samples, and let's get out of there. And then on December 5th, the spacecraft, so the Ascent module, successfully rendezvoused and docked with the module that was still in orbit, so the transfer model. As to now, at least when we're recording this podcast, the spacecraft is still in lunar orbit. It's not yet on its way home. They will wait for the perfect time window, for the perfect injection window, and then they will travel back. So what we can say is that we probably are going to have lunar samples on Earth's surface, new lunar samples on Earth's surface next week, or at least when we will record the next episode. So that's pretty cool. And then I will probably also give a new update.
Yeah, that's really, really amazing. I'm really looking forward to that.
That's an amazing mission. And how fast they're doing. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we have already talked about this in the last podcast, but when you said that we would have samples before the end of this year, I was pretty much blown away. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I was also confused when I read the timeline first. Yeah, so amazing mission. Then we have another amazing mission, the Hayabusa 2 mission. That has also now December 5th, so 4 days ago. It's also a sample return mission, but not from the moon, but samples from another asteroid called Ryugu. Hayabusa is a Japanese mission, so a mission from JAXA. It is in collaboration with the German Aerospace Center, so the DLR, and also SNES, so the French government space agency. And also the Australian space agency is involved because this is where the samples landed. So if you don't know the mission, maybe it launched back in 2014 and it then traveled to Ryugu, which is a near-Earth asteroid, actually quite small, with a diameter of like 1 kilometer, so not directly small, but there are also larger objects there. And then in the end of last year, so November 2019, they took samples of the surface and the subsurface, And now they brought it back to the Earth's surface and everything worked correctly. And yeah, we have new samples of an asteroid. Pretty incredible. These are really cool samples because we think that they should have one of the oldest material that we have for our solar system. So about 4.5 to 4.6 billion years old.
Is there a quicker way to say why this is the current thought?
Yeah, I can try. So this asteroid is part of an asteroid type that is thought to be on large dimensions how should I say that, unmodified since the formation of the solar system. So you have your stone and your iron meteorites, meteorites that consist mostly of iron. And with that, you basically know that something should have happened, because why is there iron in this abundance? So there was a modification of the material later, which in the case of iron meteorites was a planet formation. So iron went to the core of this planetissimals, of this early planet, and this is where the meteorite or the asteroid is then coming from.
Of course. Yeah, I remember that.
And Ryugu is an C-type asteroid, and they are, at least not on the scales, modified. So the material is, of course, there are impacts on these things and collisions and things like that, but still, they are not that, they are very original in their very original form. I can put it like that, I guess. Mm-hmm. Of course, it gets a bit more complicated when you go to detail, but yeah. So this mission is also known because they had these 3 small rovers on the surface of the asteroid, if you remember those.
Yeah.
So the ones with no wheels, because, there's very small gravity, but they jumped around the surface, so that was quite interesting. Cool mission. We have now samples, so everything worked fine. Pretty cool. Yeah. Maybe before we will join into our main topic, 2 small things, just very quickly. The SpaceX will test its new Starship, hopefully in the next 2 days. The first attempt was yesterday, but 1 second before the launch, the engine shut itself down because there were some weird things, some weird measurements, so it shut itself down. And there is 2 more new windows, and this is today and tomorrow. So yeah, hopefully we will see the new test. This will be in high altitude suborbital flight test. I think up to 15 kilometers or 12 kilometers. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool. Alan said himself on Twitter that the success chance is somewhere near 30% in his opinion. So we'll see.
So then let's just go and try.
Yeah, it will be interesting either way. And then lastly, or sadly, and I think at this point everybody probably already heard that, but the Arecibo Observatory is collapsed. I don't want to go into detail here. This is very sad. It was a monument of science, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are videos of the crash of 2 perspectives. If you don't have watched that till now, you can do that. Very amazing footage. Just to see this large structure collapse in itself.
Yeah, it's a pretty sad sight, but at the same time it was kind of fascinating to see this giant structure collapse. It's pretty sad. I have already said before we started recording that I have recently watched the new Netflix series Alien Worlds, and Arecibo can be seen in the final episode. And yeah, I watched this episode just after news of the collapse had broken, or at least just as after I had seen the videos. So yeah, pretty sad coincidence.
Sad. It was a monument of science.
Yeah.
And so many scientific achievements. Maybe we can talk about these achievements at a later time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this is a topic that was talked about a lot in the last days. But I just wanted to give also my quick opinion about it because, it's just sad. So, with that, are there any things you want to add in our today's introduction?
No, I'm pretty happy.
Okay, cool. Then we will quickly go into a small break and then we will come back with our main discussion for today.
All right. Yeah, so the main part. On to the juicy stuff. So we have watched the movie Dante's Peak because we thought it's the end of the year and we would just like to do something different, try something different for the next episode. So Dante's Peak is a movie from 1997 featuring Pierce Brosnan in the main role, which deals with a volcanic eruption. So the basic premise is it's 15 years after the catastrophic Mount St. Helens eruption. And the plot essentially is that our main character, Harry, is a geologist, a volcanologist at the USGS, US Geological Survey. And all of a sudden, a volcano near Dante's Peak, a small town in the Cascades in the northwesternmost US, starts to show potential signs of unrest. He is sent out to investigate, and yeah, who would have thought, the whole thing erupts. And then we are basic. Yeah, spoiler alert. I mean, this is going to go for the remainder of the episode. Duh. Spoilers. Heavy spoilers for a movie which is 23 years old. Yeah, no, but that's the basic premise. We follow the investigations and people dealing with the eruption. And of course, because we are a geocentric... Oh, damn, no, that's a bad term. But because we are a geology-centric podcast, we would like to talk... Sorry. We would like to talk about how realistic the movie is, first and foremost. And yeah, we thought we would just start with the plot, and we will just discuss every scene, bit by bit, I think.
Yeah. Then we can look at the plot itself and then, of course, at the science. Maybe, actually, another question first. Mm-hmm. Before we start. Just overall, did you like that movie? Without going into detail.
Yes. So, actually, the movie is... It surprised me very, very positively, I gotta say. Because, I experienced this shitty, bad word, 90s action, nature, disaster movie. And I got a movie which actually knew what it was doing for some time. I mean, it's a pretty... the first half is way, way better than the second half. We'll get to that, but yeah. Yeah, actually, I liked it more than I expected.
Yeah, for me also, I was very surprised. I did not expect it. I actually confused it with another movie. And I've heard a lot of bad stuff about the other movies. I was kind of, alright, let's go into this. And then in the end, I was really surprised because in my notes, the large part of my notes of the first half, I did write something, and then after that, I just wrote nice.
Yeah.
Realistic.
Nice. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that.
I think you asked which other movie, and I don't know actually. I searched for it, but I couldn't find it. I have to do that again. Maybe I will give a quick update in the next video.
Maybe we'll review this one sometime later.
Yeah.
So, shall we begin?
Yeah, let's go through it.
So then, we start actually not in the US, but we start in Colombia. The intro is an eruption in Colombia, and our protagonist, Harry Dalton, he is there with his wife and, you know, in general, the whole volcanologist team, and they are caught midst of an eruption. So, and this was one thing that actually kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I watched this movie, because his wife is so obsessed with her subject that she is willing to risk her life because she wants to stay near the erupting volcano and wants to collect more data, save the data. Yeah, and he has to convince her that they have to flee, and she dies when she is hit by flying debris when they are trying to leave the place. So this is...
Yeah, our professor in volcanology also quoted that volcanologists are probably the geologists that do the most dangerous stuff.
Yeah, but it was just this obsessed scientist stereotype, which just... We are human beings as well, you know.
Yeah, and especially at that point, I think nearly all of the town was already on fire, wasn't it? She was like, no.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. Everything is burning, everything is exploding, burning debris is falling from the skies. What the hell? Like, probably because of the obsession of his wife. I don't know, but that's just the intro. I mean, that's just to set us up. He has experienced loss through an erupting volcano. So we know that he is going to be very, very careful when it comes to considering whether a volcano is going to be dangerous or not. So then
It's a big motivation for the later movie. But just, if I want to add something into the introduction. Sure. There was actually one thing that really confused me when I started watching it, because the beginning scenes had like this very orangey filter.
Yeah.
And very confusing shots. Yeah. It was very difficult to actually realize what's happening. And then you see horses and then people with like cowboyish styles and things like that. And at the first beginning, I was really confused at what time period I'm in. It was like, it's just like a quote best of volcanic eruptions. What is happening? I was really confused till like the plot started with him and his wife, and then I realized, oh wait, okay, sorry.
So this volcano has erupted back in the 19th century.
Yeah, I thought it was like a backflash to an early eruption. I was confused about that, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, all right. But then we skip ahead 4 years. We start with him training. We start with him, oh shit, what it is? Push-ups. Push-ups. Maybe we could add the German word of the day. Liegestütze.
Yeah, right. So there you have it.
Liegestütze. Sit-ups. No, push-ups. Damn it.
Also in weird word when you now think of it, Liegestütze. Just means laying and pushing against laying, I guess.
Liegestütze directly translated would mean laying support.
Yeah, right, laying.
Anyway.
Practical word.
Yeah. So, you know, he's like frustrated 4 years later and 4 years of push-ups and he's still angry, still sad. No, but he's called by his boss, Paul, who is also, surprise, another volcanologist of the USGS. And he states that he wants Paul's opinion because a volcano in the Cascades, northwestern US, is troubling him, is showing signs of activity. So, Harry drives over to the main building, and he has a look at the data. And at first, Harry himself is very, very skeptical, because he himself states that chances that this thing erupts are 1 to 10,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it slept like 7,000 years, something like that, 5 or 7,000.
Yeah. It's later it stated that the last eruption occurred some 7,000 years ago.
Okay, 7,000. Yeah.
Yeah, but
and they showed seismic data.
Yeah.
So the data that troubled them was seismic data, movement of the surface.
Exactly, which can be a sign of a volcano reawakening. At least it shows that there is unrest in the crust. It shows that there is some activity below ground.
So normally what happens when a volcano is active, the magma will rise and move, and this movement will, well, of course, then lead to a movement of the surrounding material, of the surrounding subsurface, and this movement we will then see with seismometers. And it's very common. This is the most common method for monitoring volcanoes. So that's pretty realistic.
Yeah, a very primary indicator, but we should maybe already add that this doesn't have to mean that it's definitely a reawakening volcano. This can be caused by tectonics as well. So, the plates of Earth are moving constantly. Earth is never still. So this can also be caused by all kinds of other
in
processes.
That case, sorry. In that case, they said already that it was like a depth of 10 to 20 kilometers. We are like in the Cascada mountain range, right? So with a depth of this 10 to 20 kilometers, like tectonics is, not completely unrealistic maybe, but it should be more uncommon because, the subduction zone is way more to the west. But of course, these movements does not necessarily also have, even if there are magma movements, they are not necessarily mean there's an eruption. These are very common near volcanoes. So, we
should say that the Mount St. Helens eruption occurred some 15 years before, or about 15 years exactly, I think, before the setting of this movie, before this movie happens. So this is a common thread that runs through the movie, that it's never explicitly stated, but that, hey, Mount St. Helens is pretty close to this Dante's Peak volcano. Maybe this whole region is reawakening, becoming more active, I think. So it's basically, hey, it's in the vicinity of Mount St. Helens. Maybe this one awakens as well. This is what troubles them, I think.
Yeah, they are just more careful now.
Yeah, so we should say Harry is pretty much a major volcanologist. He's portrayed as this, he's the guy at the USGS. So his boss, Paul, wants his opinion, and Harry packs his things, drives over to Dante's Peak to do some measurements. Maybe it's a bit weird because he goes all on his own without a team or anything. It's just him.
Yeah.
Which is...
for quick work.
Yeah, it's... I would say that the USGS would likely send more people to do more extensive measurements and research, but it's just a small thing. It's really just a very small point. Yeah,
and also what we should add is that that he should actually have be on holiday right now, but he does not want to go on holiday and wants to work.
Yeah,
which I thought is very realistic because many scientists don't have that much holiday and they work everywhere.
Yeah. So he goes to Dante's Peak. They celebrate Pioneers Day. Plus, they do have a rich sponsor now who wants to grant them a huge sum of money because they have just been awarded the highest living quality for a town below 20,000 inhabitants, whatever that means.
I think the second highest. Oh, was it second highest or first highest?
Maybe. No, second highest, I think. Exactly. The man in the motel, he stated that one other place was just above them.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they have been granted a huge sum of money for being a place with a huge great living quality. So yeah, we meet one of the other protagonists, who is Rachel Wando, the mayor of Dante's Peak. So we meet her daughter. We find out that she has a son as well, who causes some trouble sometimes because why not? Yeah, and because she's the mayor, she has an address later that day, which our geologist Harry also attends. So he sees her speak, sees her thank the person who granted this town the huge sum of money, and after this address they meet up because she is scheduled to give him a tour of the volcano. So she's responsible for driving him around because what other responsibilities would a mayor have, I guess? Yeah, they pick up her son. We find out that he is frequently meeting with some other boys in an abandoned quarry, which will be important later, so remember this. There is an abandoned quarry there. They drive over to the volcano, and we get our scene where we are supposed to see that he's a geologist, that he knows his stuff, because the son pulls out a smoky quartz, which our geologist Harry then identifies as said smoky quartz.
Yeah, it was really on smoky quartz, so yes.
Yeah. This is...
Also, the kids, the kids are very stereotypical. You have like this boy that is in trouble, but very brave, and then you have this girl which is really organized and smart. I mean, I like the kids. I kind of like both actors of them. They were not annoying in any way, but
yeah,
very stereotypical.
Honestly, from the standpoint of acting, I really like the performance of her daughter.
Yeah, this was actually when she like first really appeared and talked. This is actually what I wrote down. I was like, oh, that's astonishing good. Yeah,
for child actors, which is always a difficult topic, but very, very good performance, I think. Yeah. So then they arrive at the house of their grandma. She's just going with them, hike up towards the volcano because they can't drive all the way up there. They have to walk a certain stretch. It's not the correct word. They have to walk up there, the final couple of 100 meters, and Harry wants to do some measurements. He has to do that on foot. This is also the first time that it is brought up that 15 years ago, Harry was there already, taking measurements when Mount St. Helens erupted. So we get to know that they have already surveyed this region before.
What I really liked is that he just randomly picked up a rock and looked at it.
Yeah, it's these little details that just... Yeah. I think we're pretty realistic. I mean, scientists addicted to coffee, geologists just picking up random stuff and looking at it, random rocks and looking at it.
Yeah, and also Like, one of the kids asked if he's a geologist, and he was like, no, I'm a volcanologist. Like
yeah.
small things. I find this was really good.
Yeah, because this is the thing. People in this field often are pretty adamant that you identified their discipline correctly. Yeah, but this is where we get into the bit more sciencey stuff. They walk up on the volcano's flank. Harry takes some measurements of pH, the acidity of some ponds. And this is where we get to truly see the first unusual things, because the pH he measures is 3.5, which is pretty acidic. And commonly this heightened acidity, this increased acidity of waters, standing waters surrounding volcanoes can be a sign that something is going on, that some acidic components enter these waters from below.
Definitely. And this is also very common. In many volcanic regions you have acid lakes. He measured like 3.5. They can get more acid. There are actually cases where the acidity is between 0 and 1. So they can get very, very acid. But it's very realistic. Again, it's definitely a sign for activity. But again, it's like not a very alarming sign, because this is very common for many volcanic active regions. So it does not necessarily, again, have to imply like this thing is going to interrupt.
Yeah.
But yes.
And I think it was handled pretty well, because he's not panicking. He's just like, oh, this is unusual.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be like that.
Maybe to add why they even get acid in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So we have many volcanic gases like CO2, carbon monoxide, many sulfur gases that escape the magma chamber below, and then the gases will move up because they're, because of their lighter.
Yep.
And they will move up cracks and faults and anything like that. And then when they reach the surface, they will often be very abundant in small depressions or lakes, or, all of these areas. What we also see, and then when they get into water, they then are in the solution of water, and this is where the acidities come from. But also what we see in the background are, for example, dying trees, which is also very common, because this is what happens when these gases reach the surface. Then trees, for example, can die, which also indicates that these gas leaks are probably actually active now for quite some time when the first trees start to act.
Yeah, it's just these gases accumulating in the ground and suffocating even the roots of plants.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. And this is what he sees as well. He sees dead trees. He asks how long these have been dead and how common this is. So it was really well done, because he went for the first things that you would commonly go for.
Yeah.
We then see some dead squirrels, which have also been... Mm-hmm.
Sorry, but there have been done something before, right? The boiling part.
No, this was before we get to that. Oh. No.
The squirrels were, I think, at the boiling part.
Yeah. Let's just move on. I'll string these scenes together.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, they walk on, and they first discover 2 dead squirrels. And this is already pretty weird, because why are 2 squirrels just laying there dead? And they have been dead for some time because maggots were feasting on their meat. So they get to this hot spring, and Harry notices that the water is boiling, and just when the son of Rachel wants to jump into the water, he keeps him back. He stops him. This water is truly boiling, and this is the scene I skipped, because earlier on we see a young couple bathing there, and then all of a sudden this water gets heated up very quickly and boils them alive. And then in this scene, after Harry held Rachel's son back from suffering the same fate, they discover the dead bodies of these two. Which is rather unrealistic because it heated so quickly, I would say. I mean, we should say that that the USGS actually released a Q&A sheet for this film, for this movie. And one of the questions on that sheet was whether this is realistic, and at least the USGS answer was that it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, it's uncommon, definitely. But it can happen. So there are events that we monitored where things like this happen. For example, Hot Creek. Now I don't know the when, but in Hot Creek, during like 5 seconds, the water started boiling from like 20 degrees Celsius to boiling water, and all the fish died. So in this certain events, there are certain triggers. For example, a small earthquake that disrupts the water flow in the subsurface, or gases that get released very quickly, and then things like this can happen.
Okay.
So it's not very completely unrealistic, but it's definitely uncommon. Normally, these heatings would take place over days, weeks, or even months. And again, it does actually not always have to be the case. So before an eruption of a volcano, not every time the lakes near that had should be like boiling or something like that. But yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for you there, because like after the people died, the camera moves into the water, and then there's this like weird, this,
the red light.
Yeah. So about that, I don't know how to interpret this, because at first I thought like they were moving the camera like through the subsurface to the magma chamber. But then I looked at it again, and then I thought it seems like there is lava moving into this water lake.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I think my first thought was that this should just represent that some crack had just opened and that something really hot had entered. Be that hot water, maybe this was supposed to be the magma chamber below, but actually I didn't really think about this detail too much, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense too much.
Yeah, because if it would be lava that is like moving directly into the small pot, then the water would not just boil, but it would basically a steam explosion.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. As soon as the magma would erupt into this little pond, into this hot spring, it would just go boom.
Yeah. Maybe because we now say a lot about lava and magma. So magma is when there is molten material in the subsurface, and once it will reach the surface, then it is called lava. So it's just like, if you don't know that. I mean, not you, but the listeners.
Fun fact of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about rocks, the fun stuff.
Oh yeah, and the dead animals are also very realistic. That also happens when they're like carbon monoxide or something like that, or even carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
both.
Exactly, but in this case, it was dioxide. Yeah. So what happens is carbon dioxide is heavier than the surrounding air, and it just forms a carpet on the ground. So I think this was why they showed very small animals and squirrels, to show that there is this deadly carpet on the ground. Because what CO2 does is it just basically pushes oxygen away.
It suffocates you.
Exactly. Oxygen is just pushed up because CO2 is way heavier. carbon monoxide is actually way more problematic because what CO2 does, it just pushes away the oxygen. What carbon monoxide does is it attaches to the sites in your lung where oxygen would attach. So it blocks oxygen receptors. With CO2, the thing is, as soon as you move out of this cloud, you're good to go. You can breathe again. But with carbon monoxide, the problem is that it actually blocks your lung.
Yeah. And this can be really dangerous on large scales. So there are scenarios. I think the most famous or the most latest one is a volcanic lake in Africa. That during the night there was a large gas leak and a lot of CO2 was dissolved and moved in a small, into a small village next to the lake. And the next morning, basically everybody in this village was dead.
Yeah.
I don't know the number of how many people were dead at that point, but this was quite many people. So yeah.
Yeah. So these are the hidden dangers of volcanoes because you can't see it, you can't smell it. It's a pretty grim fate.
Correct.
So, but to get back to the movie, we have now this situation that Harry knows something is going on, right? He knows that something is active. He knows that 2 people have died because of this volcano. And what he does is he calls his team from the USGS. And him and Rachel, they call together the city council. At least I would think that this was supposed to be the city council. Important people from the town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remember, they have just received a grant because of their price, second highest living quality. What is presented now is actually quite interesting, and this is one thing I think we both agree on. This movie does especially well is showing what kinds of problems go into this situation, what different motives people can have, because now this little town faces the situation that this price of second highest living quality could be taken away from them, and with it this grant, which would have been used to increase maybe the infrastructure of the place, to make this place more economically viable, basically to push the economy with tourism and stuff like that. And this is why the city council is pretty skeptical. They are actually pretty much against evacuating this town because they don't want this grant to be taken away.
Yeah. I think, this is one of the very good parts of the movie where you see the different reactions of the people, and it's very difficult to work with that.
Yeah. I think I would have liked a bit more of a back and forth between Rachel as the mayor and the other people, because really she is the one in between all of that. She has to think of the people and their safety. She has to think of the economy. Have communicated a bit more, because she's really just more of a bystander.
Yeah. Also, one of the guys there said that he could put a town on notice and then nothing happens. Which also happened before, of course, that people were evacuated and then in the end nothing happens, because volcanoes are pretty difficult to monitor. I mean, not difficult to monitor, but it's very difficult to then actually predict when a volcano is going to erupt.
Yeah.
Or if and when a volcano is going to erupt. So, yeah. Maybe I just wanted to the point of view of the of Harry. I just wanted to go through that, because now let's put in order what everything happened to this point. So we had these earthquakes, these small earthquakes at a depth of 10 to 20 kilometers. We had head boiling water pits. we had an acidity or an acidic lake, and we had dead squirrels, right? So this is what happened to that point. Now, what would you do in that point? That's difficult to say, because all of these signs are definitely signs that there's activity, of course. But there are no signs that, or there are no explicit signs, Jesus, that the volcanic eruption is very close.
Yeah.
There can be, but they don't have to, because this is very common just near volcanic regions. So that he calls a city council and then goes through it. Like, at this point, he just states that he wants the others to be careful, that they want that, people know that something is happening, and that people can be then prepared if something is going to happen. And at that point, I think this is very realistic, like from his point of view, because he does not want the people to panic at that point. Just the volcano slept over such a long period of time, and now there is again activity, then of course people should know it. So I would personally, and I guess now there's a point where also maybe scientists would disagree, but personally, I think that I would act the same way in his, and if I was him. So just putting everyone on alert to say, okay, something is going on here. It doesn't have to mean anything. It could be nothing, but you should at least know and to prepare for an event.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm maybe a bit more of the critical guy in this, because, I mean, in a real case, yes, I would absolutely agree with you. Because this is also, one of the narrative threads of this movie, or better, one of the central subjects of this movie, that you should react at the right point of time. And hey, better to be careful than to regret it later on. Regret not doing anything. But actually, when I watched this movie for the first time, I had trouble understanding why he was freaking out that much, because maybe we could move along the plot right now, because the team arrives and his boss at first, he's not outraged but upset. He's upset with him because he thinks that Harry is too sensitive, that this doesn't have to mean something, as you have already stated. It doesn't have to mean something. He wants to do more research at first until next steps are taken. And at that point, I was more on the side of his boss, because I thought it was pretty early to truly take measures. He was flipping out about things that are pretty common in volcanic regions, but then again, we never truly get to know whether something like this is common in the area. It's implied that it isn't, therefore it's unusual, and therefore it's a reason for concern.
Right. Because the volcano was sleeping for such a long time.
Yeah.
He also explained in the scene, because somebody asked him, like, the volcano's extinct, and he was like, no, it's just sleeping.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for normal, like, just volcanic regions, this would probably be not a case where people will put an alarm. But I think that in this case, because nobody has the volcano basically on his mind, and nobody thinks of it, people are not prepared for something like that. And also at that point, even 2 people died. So, for example, the hot springs should definitely be closed at that point. People should be alarmed that they maybe should not go into the forest for long periods of time because of the CO2. So stay at home. Like, don't go into the forest, don't use the hot springs. Also, the water is acid, so try not to bathe in the lakes. So these are things that should definitely be told to the public. So I get his point that he just wants to inform the people living there that you live near a volcano. This volcano is not extinct. It is active. Maybe it's not he's not claiming it's erupting very nearly, but he just wants to tell people, be careful, guys. And I think from this perspective, I think it's actually, I would actually act quite similar to him, I would guess.
Yeah. As I've said, in a real scenario, yes, definitely. But it was just that during the movie I had trouble really wrapping my mind around why he was taking measures that quickly. But by the way, one thing that really upset me, Harry is Paul's major geologist, right? So this is his star volcanologist, the guy even he wants an opinion from because he isn't sure about what he's seeing. And then when he tells him what is up, what he thinks, he just doesn't listen to him. And that's really one part that really confused me, because at first he wants his opinion and then he's upset when he gets his opinion. So
also, he should have been in break, like in holidays.
Yeah.
And his boss is like telling him, no, you don't need holidays right now, you can do this later, go there. And then now he's like, oh, you should take holidays. I was like, okay. Yeah, I was.
They were.
Weird too.
He was designed to not like him.
Yeah. Or to be like the kind of like bad guy, and this is where I'm. I think this is very discussed about a bit more later.
Yeah. I mean, it's just that evening they go out for a drink because geologists like to drink beer, I guess.
Yes, that's correct. But sorry, can we just go back again to the meeting, because there are some small points I want to give for
you keep going back.
Yeah, I just have some notes to that, because at that point they are also addressing some new stuff. So what is the boss called again?
Paul.
Okay, so this is the first thing you have to keep in mind. I'm really bad with names. I've forgotten all of them. I actually wanted to do a list, but it is not that complete, so I guess I have to ask you maybe more often. So, Paul. In this scene, he's, as we stated, like more the skeptic guy. He wants just to be calm and the people to be careful and calm. So everything is correct here. That's okay. And he now states some new monitoring devices. So what he says is that we need more evidence, and this is what we're going to try to get now. And therefore, he will have more seismometers, which, that's very realistic. You will use seismometers in that case. Then he said tilt meters. And this is very interesting because, yes, this is very cool. I was very surprised by that. Tilt meters are used very commonly, very often in these cases. I mean, maybe not even often, but every time. So the movement of the magma chamber will also lead to movements of the surface. So you will see changes in the height of the surface, changes in just movements over some meters where material, this tree was before some meters farther west or something like that. And these are things that definitely show movement of the underlying magma chamber. And that's why these tilt meters are very common and very often used. Also often in combination with GPS systems.
Yeah. And this is, again, a nice point to move on, because now we get to the stuff which is another strength of this movie. It doesn't just talk great, but it also shows us what they are talking about. So we do actually see some days worth of field work. They go into a bar later after the city council meeting. The morning, then they get to the helicopter, and during this helicopter flight over the volcano, they do look at potential points where, maybe gases extrude the surface. They measure the sulfur dioxide contents above the volcano, which is one gas very commonly associated with active volcanoes. And once again, they don't really notice anything. Everything looks right.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
So the device they used, they actually called the name COSPEC, which is true. This device exists in real life. It also looked really real. I mean, it could have been maybe just a model, but it looked really real. And this is a spectrometer that is very often used. You can also use it in like planes. I think, as far as I've read, are helicopters more unlikely. I mean, not unrealistic, but it's maybe a bit difficulter, it seems, in helicopters. But again, this is completely realistic. It's okay. That's I think it was very cool that they even called the device by its name. It was not like, we're going to measure gases, but it was like, yeah, we're using COSPEC.
I didn't even catch that, but this Thomas is the one who has way more knows more about volcanoes, volcanism, volcanology in general than me, because he had the corresponding courses at university. I didn't. I mean, I know the basics, of course. So it's not that I don't know what I'm talking about, but Thomas is it's more of his expertise than mine.
One thing to add in the scene, and I wanted to see if you did catch that, and I was kind of confused about that. Mm-hmm. They float over the peak with the helicopter, and they measure the gases. And he was like, there are no measurements. I mean, if I look at the readings, here's no sign of any activity. And right in this moment, you see a shot of the crater pit, where gases or like steam is rising to the sky, and I was like, wait, there's steam.
That was what I was thinking as well. This is actually the final note I have for the scene. Gases rising, steam rising. All right then.
I mean, it could be just water, but still, this is still a sign of activity. So, yeah.
Right. And activity close to the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. Harry and Rachel have dinner later on, which is not really too important for us. He once again reminds us that he has lost his wife during an eruption. So once again, we are remembered of his personal motivation behind the plot of the film, of the movie. The next day...
And also the movie was... the movie was also, I think, from the beginning on very clear that there's going to be a relationship between Harry and the mayor, Rachel. And I think at least at that point, that was pretty... Yeah.
Thomas, we're talking about geology, damn it.
But it's about the humans too, you know.
Yeah.
Their personal influences. Okay, carry on.
Yeah. Okay, the next day we see them installing seismometers. And I don't know, I didn't really catch too much of this scene. They were just there and burying seismometers.
Yeah. Again, really realistic, because it's exactly how you do it. You put, these containers, or not containers, what are they? Barrels. You put the barrels into ground, into the surface, and then you will put the seismometer in it. So, yeah, that was pretty realistic. Didn't spot anything here. This was pretty cool, I thought. What I also loved about was that this one guy, they talked about, the relationships of Harry. And one of the guys did set him up previously with a woman. And he was like, yeah, but this woman was also into rocks. And Harry's answer was, oh no, he was into crystals. So yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought this was funny.
Once again, showing that they did their homework on geology. And it's a diverse area of research, and this is what I think comes across here, because they build in all these kind of little in-jokes. And then, I mean, I think you wouldn't get this, but for the Breaking Bad fans out there, over 20 years later, and this can still be used as a reference to Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad. So for those of you who got that, nice. God damn it, Mary, these are minerals, these aren't rocks. Yeah. So now, on to the next day. The next day they set up the most impractical looking rover I have ever seen.
Yeah.
They called it Spider Legs. It's basically, it looks like a rover, and it's also implied that this is a NASA thing. But it has spider legs, and they look pretty immobile.
So I'm going, during we recorded a podcast, I'm just going to send you an image that you should look at. So normally, this is very uncommon, definitely. This is not something that is very commonly used. Yeah. But in that case, they actually, I mean, they even called that this thing is from NASA. And actually, there is a NASA robot called Dante, which is actually built for exactly like that. So there's a weird NASA robot where they wanted to see if it is possible to, look at volcanoes that way. People don't use it. Yeah, they wanted to, when it's too dangerous for people, they wanted to use this robot.
Yeah, but
so
it
looks similar.
It just looks, that's the thing. I mean, of course, nobody can see this image right now, but basically what Thomas just sent me, it looks like the thing from the movie. But the legs of this thing, they look a bit more mobile. In the movie, I think actually... Jesus, it looked at it as if it could just walk straight lines, but not as if it could walk down some, 50-degree slope. In the movie, you never see it walking down. I mean, you see the legs moving in the crater, but no, they obviously just placed it there.
I mean, in reality, it seems to be unproductive too, because people just didn't use it. It was invented by NASA, but it wasn't used later. So I thought that it's weird that they've chosen, that they actually found that they have known of that they referred to that, so they directly referred to that robot. I just found that this was weird. This was something that I don't know. This is something that I would not have expected them to even, know that this exists. But yeah, this is weird. It's not commonly used. I mean, I guess these guys, the scientists, some of them were really into tech and kind of like nerdy. So maybe they just really wanted to try that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody really takes this situation seriously. That's also the vibe you get, that they just want to try their new toys.
Yeah.
Maybe we should mention that this thing at first has an extra long frequency sending device on it, which is used for communication, and they demount it because it's just causing problems. It stays at the base in Dante's Peak, in their base. So remember, this is going to be important later.
Okay, then maybe two more things to add here. So first of all, I just wrote coffee, exclamation mark. So yeah, they're really into coffee, and that's really realistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's 8 p.m. and I'm drinking a coffee right now.
And then, what I really thought was cool, they said that they measured like 70 or 60 earthquakes. And the mayor was directly like worried. But the answer was quickly from them, oh no, that's pretty normal. This is just minor, small microquakes.
Yeah, that was cool. That was pretty cool.
And that's also true. These small quakes you record all the time. This is nothing to be worried about.
Remember, Earth is always active. And we don't notice it most of the time because it's insignificant.
Yep. Now we can move on.
Yeah. So then they are working with this absolutely stupidly impractical rover. And then the rover gets stuck. Who would have thought? And one of Harry's colleagues climbs down to the rover to free it, and then a very, very surface-near earthquake happens. They get rescued by the helicopter, but this is essentially the point where I think when most scientists, I think, would be alarmed, would say we need to definitely get into evacuation plans.
So when the earthquake happened, do you see a transition or a camera shot in the like main center where they looked at the measurements, right? So there was this one shot where you actually see the monitor. And first of all, they used real software. So that software is actually used for that. And you see actually seismic measurements on that shot. And I'm pretty sure that these are actually real measurements. It's not just some random stuff on there, but these are real measurements. And I'm pretty sure about that. Because what you see is there are two, so on a seismogram, what you see is over a time period, which is on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis is basically the amplitude. So you see these waves in this graph in the end. And there are two large following, well, how should I call that? Like there's one amplitude, and then there is nothing in between, and then there's a new one. And I found this was really,
two strokes, basically.
Yeah, two strokes, exactly, right. That's what I was searching for. And it's pretty cool, because that's why I think these are actually measurements. Because, I mean, they're very difficult to interpret, and there are probably different ways to do this. But from my knowledge, what I have done, you know that there are two different kind of waves. So, in seismic wave, there are two different kinds of them. There are S wave, which are shear waves, and there are P waves, which are pressure waves. And the difference is that shear waves move through these typical wave-like motions, you would guess, so horizontal and vertical motions of the, just the material itself. And P waves, so pressure waves, then the material will actually get elongated and pressured, and so the wave is moving through as well in pressure wave, as the name says. And pressure waves are faster, so P waves are faster than S waves. So what you see when you look at these after an earthquake, for example, you see different peaks, because these waves will reach the seismometer at different points of time. And that's why I think that these are actually really measurements of some earthquake. Very simplistic, as it wasn't simplistic measurement. Definitely not like raw data. It was already processed, I guess. But this was just pretty cool, and I thought that they actually used like real data and not just, displayed something on this display. It was just there for a sec or something like that.
Yeah, it's really, once again, it's showing that they did their homework. This isn't just, some random animation. They saved this for the second half. But yeah, that's really the strong suit of this first half of this movie. Would you like to add something, or
Yeah.
shall we move on?
No, I think we can move on.
All right. Yeah, because now things are really getting serious. At least one would think so, because now Harry is going over to his boss, Paul, and he's basically now truly upset. He really wants people to be alarmed. He wants people to come up with an evacuation plan and to leave town. Paul still isn't convinced. And basically, the whole point is these different indicators of activity of this volcano, they come very rapidly. So that's why Harry is that alarmed, because it's not just that there are certain things which could hint at activity, but that these different indicators, they increase over days very, very rapidly. So this then causes him to think that an eruption is imminent and not just, a volcano, that it's not just a volcano slowly waking up. I mean, this actually is the case. Just because activity increases, this doesn't have to mean that something is going to happen for the next hundreds of years. And I mean, there is a case to be made that it's a very rapid and unrealistically rapid increase of activity in this movie. Not necessarily, because this happened at Mount St. Helens, for instance. It was incredibly rapid. There wasn't really time for planning. But once again, going back to this USGS sheet, they were like, yeah, it's all pretty it's unusually rapid.
Common, yeah.
Yeah. But it can happen.
Yeah, it definitely can. For Mount St. Helens, there was like this, it started to get more active, and then there was the steam explosion. And then for several weeks, there was nothing. For several weeks, all was resting again. And then suddenly, it erupted. And I've known it only very shortly before the eruption. They were like, oh, wait, maybe something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this can definitely happen, but I mean, of course, they speeded it up for the movie, and it can happen, but it's unusual.
And I mean, I understand that from an artistic point of view, because yeah, you have to squeeze this into 2 hours. So, but yeah, that's the point. We do now have these different viewpoints. The scientist who wants to alarm everybody, the scientist who is too skeptical. We have Rachel, who needs to basically pay attention to all different factors: the economy, her people, the safety of the people. But also she has to face the fact that there is an imminent danger. And despite the fact that, now things are getting serious, Paul is still like, no, we're going to leave town tomorrow. And that's really where this movie slowly, I don't know, this is where slowly things start to get a bit ridiculous, because that's literally what Paul does. He wants to go back. He wants to go back, leave Dante's Peak, because nothing's gonna happen. That's his opinion, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, at least they should have, at least also in his opinion, the public should, now be introduced to that there is now a new danger from the volcano, and they should be more careful.
Yeah. He's really just silly at this point.
Yeah. I mean, of course there are, the problem with that is, so first of all, they should have also just mentioned it to the public, of course. And I will just put that aside now, they should have done it either way. But there are different point of views, in this topic, and that there would be people that would react much differently and maybe much more, calm and careful and be like, oh no, that's nothing. I've seen this in 20 volcanoes before and it never erupted. That there are discussions between these people. I wouldn't even say it's unbelievable, unrealistic. I would say that it probably happened before and it probably can happen again, that people are like, see these things very differently. But my problem here, so this is not even, it's kind of silly, definitely. But it still is kind of realistic because people are silly. But the largest problem I have is that in this case, it's again this typical stereotype we see in so many science movies, where the one guy that is just the loudest and the most alarmist is correct in the end. And this is the case that in these things happened, that actually the loudest and most alarmist guy was right in the end, of course. But the stereotype is actually kind of dangerous. A good example, I think, is always medicine, where you have cancer research, and there's this one guy who claims that he has the best way to, cure cancer. But all the scientists on all of the world are saying that he is wrong. And people will use this as an argument for the guy, like, oh, he's like the one hero that has the cure, but nobody believes him. Yeah, but in the end, maybe it's just bullshit, and that's why everybody say it's wrong, And I think this is a very typical stereotype that we've seen so many movies where science is involved. And while it is realistic in that case, I wouldn't say that's completely unrealistic. It is still, I still didn't really like it because it supports the stereotype in people's minds, and I don't like that.
The next scene then takes place in hospital because Harry was up on the volcanic crater with a colleague, the one who climbed down to the rover thingy. He was injured, his colleague that is, and then the team assembles in hospital. And actually Harry gives a pretty cool example where the movie tries to explain why everybody remains so calm. I will stick with the fact, or stick with my opinion, that this team is pretty relaxed and doesn't really think about things too much. But this example of a frog sitting in slowly warming water, he won't notice that the water temperature is increasing drastically until he is boiled. It is boiled. Whereas when you drop a frog right into boiling water, he's going to immediately react to that. And that's actually kind of a good analogy, a good explanation. Things are steadily increasing and the team is just going with it, not thinking too much of it. They have accepted that this is an active region. But then again, if they would have arrived there and would have seen earthquakes, would have seen boiling water all around this volcano, they would maybe have reacted otherwise. It's a pretty weak explanation to say why everybody is so calm until it's too late, but yeah, in and of itself, a nice example, I think.
Yeah, I think too.
But yeah, then, as already stated, Paul has decided they'll leave the next day, and in the evening Harry visits Rachel, and when they're at her house, she wants to get a glass of water, and all of a sudden this water, it smells after sulfur element. And it's very, very dirty. So he wants her to drive him to the water tank, the local water tank, for the drinking water. Yeah, and when they get in there, they see that the water is completely contaminated with sulfur dioxide. And this is, for some reason, then finally the thing that convinces Paul that something is wrong when Harry visits him and presents to him a glass with sulfur dioxide contaminated water.
Yeah, this was also kind of weird that in the end this is like their main point where like, alright, now we have to act.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the latest thing in a chain of events, in a chain of steadily increasing indicators, but yeah, that's the final drop.
Yeah. And again, that's very realistic. It happens in real life too. Also, this brownish color is often from ash or other material that was then, dissolved in the water. Yeah. But again, the time period that is that fast. I mean, again, I guess it's possible under the right conditions in the exactly right triggers. But again, it's more uncommon and untypical that it happens that extremely fast and suddenly all the water is sulfuric and brown.
Exactly. Yeah, but then they react. And who would have thought, once again, it's too late. The National Guard will only arrive the next day. The evacuation is completely chaotic. People panic. And yeah, that's what happens when you just do not inform people or inform them too late, alarm them too late. People are going to panic because we are only biological beings. When we're stressed and threatened with death, facing death, we panic. It's just difficult to remain calm, and it's a thing only few people can do in these situations. And yeah, so everything is going to S-word. As if I hadn't sweared on this podcast before. But then at the same time, they notice everything is increasing. Gas concentrations rise, seismic activity rises. Everything is basically now really getting serious all of a sudden, within minutes. Then, on the evening of the next day, they have another city council meeting, but this time with the citizens as well to inform them. The evacuation truly starts then, and this is when the volcano finally erupts. And this is at the same time where the movie kind of fell off a cliff for me. Because now this is, while before we had this well-researched and admittedly pretty impressive piece of work, and now it just devolves into silly action nature disaster movie, I think. For the most part.
Yeah, for the most parts, especially for the plot, yes. There's still some interesting things about science. This is also the part where they're the largest mistakes. But also some things are still quite accurate. I mean, the first thing that happens directly now, if we want to continue with the plot, and is also very unrealistic, is this very large earthquake that just goes on for minutes and minutes, and then the houses and everything breaks down. Yeah, that's very untypical. So normally with volcanic eruptions, they are not that large earthquakes. So we have earthquakes with magnitudes of maybe 5 or 4, anything like that. And, once buildings are collapsing, then we talk about earthquakes with magnitudes of 7 and maybe larger. And again, under the right circumstances, this happened before, but this is very, very unlikely and very untypical. And with that, we have just so many things that are very uncommon and typically now all happening at the same time. So yeah, this was, all I wrote was, what is this quake? Lol.
Yeah, but basically what now happens is everybody is panicking. Everybody is trying to leave. The National Guard has arrived at this point, because it's one day later, but they are not too much of a help. They are trying to guide people. They are helping the scientists to leave. The scientists pack up their stuff for the most part. Some stuff stays behind. Once again, will be important later. And Rachel and Harry, they're also going to get the kids, Rachel's kids, and they're gone.
That stayed at home.
Exactly. The town hall meeting took place. Volcano erupts. Kids were at home at that time. They are trying to save their grandmother because their grandmother has decided to stay where she is. You know, once again, we get this further viewpoint, this further perspective. She's been living there her whole entire life, and she just doesn't want to leave it. She just doesn't want to leave this house she has built with her own hands behind. And yeah, the kids, they won't accept it. As we've established, her son, Rachel's son, is a bit of a square peg at times. So of course he's only 12, 13 years old, but he knows how to drive a car, and they go try
in
to
that
get
scenario.
In that scenario, and they try to get their grandmother. So Rachel and Harry go get the kids who are trying to get the grandmother. Pretty cool, I think, was the ash floating down.
Yeah, the ash was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it looks as if it was snowing, and this is pretty realistic. This is pretty realistic, but this is actual, glass, tiny shards of glass, and this is another point where this movie doesn't really pay attention to accuracy anymore because nobody is trying to cover their nose and mouth.
Yeah, even the geologists, they don't tell anybody to like at least try to cover their mouth with cloth. Yeah. I mean, these sharp glass particles can be really dangerous to your lung, really dangerous.
Yeah, and everybody's just treating it as if it was snow, basically. Just they shove it out of the way, wipers on, let's go. And yeah, I mean, we can pretty much sum this part up. Everybody's packing up. Rachel and Harry arrive at the house of the grandmother. The kids are already there. They're packing stuff, some stuff. Grandma is annoying because she's still like, oh, look at these photos. I want to keep everything. And, you know, the cliche grandmother who just doesn't... I mean, of course... I can understand this viewpoint. She doesn't want to leave everything behind, but you know, it's a life-threatening situation. And they came over there just to get her, and she's still reluctant to leave a little bit.
I mean, what I liked about her is that, you know, this is what scientists really have to deal with. People that claim just they know better than everything. Like earlier in the movie, she said to Harry that she knows this volcano and nothing's going to happen to her. And even in the last minute, she still doesn't really believe it.
Think that nothing on this planet will ever change, that everything is just static and remains the same. Nothing has ever happened here, not even when Mount St. Helens erupted, so why should it do so now? Yeah, but then again, they leave because literally... lava is enclosing their house, and luckily there is this convenient boat nearby, which they get into, and they flee from the place.
Yeah, something's happening here. Before we came to the acid lake...
You spoiled the acid lake.
Oh, sorry, but this lava lake... No, this lava flow just... No. No way. Yeah. These lava flows are of course realistic. They happen, but not with these eruptions. We have stratovolcano. We have seen the very large, very explosive eruption. And with this explosive eruptions, you have lava that has a much, much, much higher viscosity. With these eruptions, you don't have lava flows. You know, these are lava flows that we see in Hawaii, for example, with very, very low viscosity lavas and magmas. There are no large explosions. It's very effusive. We call these effusive eruptions when just lava is, floating out of the, flowing out of the volcano and nothing really happens.
Zero gravity volcano.
Yeah. So these are Hawaiian style eruptions. These are effusive. And then we have explosive eruptions, as we see in the movie, which is probably in Blinyanisch to ultra Blinyanisch eruption. And the lava is really high viscosity.
Yeah.
And you won't have lava flows, so no.
Yeah, so essentially it's either everything explodes or you have these flowing streams of magma.
Yeah.
One of both.
At least at the same time.
Yeah, my favorite part of this crappy second half, the acid lake. Yeah, so they are on this aluminum boat just going down the stream, and all of a sudden they notice that literally the boat is starting to melt away below their feet. And this is the best part on all of this. Actually, parts of the motor dissolve. You know, the fins on... Jesus, what's it called? In German, it's Schiffsschraube. Additional German word of the day. But the moving part, the propeller, moving the boat forward, it dissolves. So he lifts it up. And remember, this lake is eating away at an aluminum boat at an increasing rate. And what does Pierce Brosnan? Harry, what does he do? He wraps a jacket around his hand and starts to pedal along in a lake that is dissolving metal, with nothing but his jacket to protect his hand.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
also...
there are maybe polymers out there pretty resistant to acid, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually not even the biggest problem I had with that, but because back in the days you actually used cotton things to secure yourself for acid in like laboratories and stuff like that. But the problem
but you didn't tap your hand into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also this acidity is just ludicrous.
yeah, that's the other thing.
The boat dissolves in like minutes. What happened in that lake?
Yeah, and so they are trying to reach the shore. So Granny sacrifices herself, pulls the boat ashore, and for some reason she isn't completely skeletized after that. She just has literally...
Which is realistic. I mean...
Yeah,
I guess
of course.
It is realistic, but the boat part's unrealistic. Probably it would have been more acidy, like that she has problems after that.
I just meant in relation. So it's eating away at metal immediately. So so you see, we are just skimming through this because plot armor is strong with our protagonists in this film.
Can I read you my note on that Grammy is like now in the water? I wrote, WTF, please undress that woman. And now, this sounds really wrong. But the problem is what you do in these cases. Undress. Dude, undress. The acid is in the clothes. Undress that woman. Try to get the acid off of her, you know? Water can be dangerous with certain acids, then at least try to dry her. Take clothes or anything you have and try to get the acid off her. But not just take her. Don't do anything.
You just started carrying her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Ooh.
but okay. We cut away. Scientists, National Guard, they're moving off. This is actually where one part comes in I once again liked because it referenced that helicopters and generally planes, helicopters, they cannot fly when a volcano is erupting. I mean, many people know this because when volcanoes on Greenland or Iceland are active, often there are interruptions of flight schedules because these ash fragments can critically damage the engine compartments, the engines of planes and helicopters. I mean, it was still ludicrous because this helicopter was literally working below the ash cloud for minutes, which, Jesus, the pilot should have known better. And yeah, then when the plot required this helicopter to go down, it went down. Yeah, but nothing more of note there, or do you want to add anything to that scene?
No, I just thought that, it was kind of realistic because it crashed, and of course that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So next, Granny dies. Very sad scene. Yeah, I'm sorry we ridicule this a lot, but the whole circumstance of her death was pretty. It was badly written. Weird, yeah. Yeah, they find a car. Harry, the kids, and Rachel. They have to leave the grandma behind. We once again cut to the science team. They cross a bridge, and this is once again where something pretty cool is shown. Something which occurs in reality, which is a lahar. The magma, the lava, basically melted ice and snow from the top of the volcano and created this huge mud and water flow, which is now flooding the rivers and creating deadly currents, ripping away the bridge they're crossing. And yeah, Paul passes away in this bridge collapse.
Yeah.
So he's the only one.
It actually looked pretty cool, right? The lahar looked amazing. I think it was a model. I don't think it was CGI.
It was pretty well done.
I think it is a model. Yeah, this looks pretty cool. It was also not that overestimated. It looked pretty realistic, actually, because these things can get that large. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and Paul, he's the one in the last car. It's doesn't manage to drive from the bridge back to the road. But his death scene I couldn't take seriously as well because they built in this weird cliche movie scream when he fell into the water. And actually nobody of the science team, except for maybe one or two of them, looked too worried, concerned, or sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, take it or leave it, I guess. We cut back to Rachel, the kids, and Harry. And this is, once again, a ludicrous scene because... So they are driving towards Dante's Peak. Back towards Dante's Peak, and then they face a lava stream crossing the road. And what would a reasonable person decide to do? If you answered trying to find another way, you bid wrong, because what does Harry do? He full throttles the car and tries to just drive over this admittedly partially solidified lava flow, with lava just flicking around in the engine compartment, blowing up the tires, and somehow they still manage to cross the stream.
Yeah. I mean, can I get a bit nerdy on that one?
Of course.
So
that's why we're here.
I have looked at numbers, so there would be no basaltic melt at that volcano again, but what is shown is basaltic melt. It is this prop off, and it's very it is basaltic lava that they show on the movie, even if it's not realistic. And basaltic melt already has a temperature of about around 1,200 Celsius. We are above 1,000 degrees Celsius. And then you can actually look at the color of the lava, and with the color you can still get an idea of the temperature. And if I'm being very, very, calm and try to really look at the lowest possible temperature that this lava could have had, then it's still 600 degrees Celsius. And it was probably hotter, so no, you're not driving over that with a car.
Yeah, I mean, it was just this visual of lava just flicking around in the engine compartment, dripping from the car, and the car is still working. I mean, hey, good cooling system, I guess.
I mean, this car was also basically completely underwater before. With water.
Oh no, it was a new car actually.
Oh, okay. Oh,
was
right.
It? Yeah, they found it after.
It was a new car. Right. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, but we just skipped the river crossing scene that was when they were going after the kids because it was just insignificant.
Yeah.
Yeah. They arrive back at the Dante's Peak base, and they see this bridge that is gone. You know, the bridge that collapsed due to the lahar where Paul died. And Harry goes back into the camp to look for things he could still need later on. And he goes to get the extremely long frequency sender from NASA, the thing they dismounted from the Spider rover thing earlier before. Because this is actually capable of communicating a signal way far out. A signal that can be noticed from very far distances. I mean, I don't know. Do we have anything to add to that? This is more in your ballpark than mine. Oh, okay.
No, I did not go into detail of that. Probably realistic, I guess, but
yeah, it's just basically it's just a Deus Ex Machina machine.
I mean, at least they have shown it before. It was not like completely unknown.
It was there for a reason, yeah. He didn't just find it on coincidence. Yeah. And then, luckily, the scientists left behind their computer. And luckily, the seismometers are all still working and analyzing. Because then he sees on the computer screen that the predicted model says that this volcano is going to blow up. Which is, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but this seemed to be more of a thing just to create drama and not like any kind of real simulation. I mean, this isn't what seismometers would show, I think.
I don't know about that. I also thought that normally, like, your computer wouldn't show a 3D model of the volcano where it's like volcano, where it's like arrows coming out and it's like, oh, it's exploding. I don't think so. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think so.
I mean, it was straightforward, a model of the volcano with the tip being red, arrows pointing out, so you know that everything is going to blow up, and next to that was predicted model or something like that. So, drama, just for drama.
But what I was a bit confused about that at that point, the ash. I mean, the ash was pretty different. Sometimes there was strong ash, sometimes there are nearly no ash. So the ash, I guess the ash would stay longer. At least it would be more darker for a longer time period.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was just.
But what I found cool is that there was, thunder and that stuff and flashes.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool because lightning and thunder would happen in real life too.
Yeah, I forgot that. that's pretty common in these ash clouds. Yeah. Then that was pretty cool. I even mentioned this to my girlfriend when we watched this movie for the first time. I really like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one more thing. It's these little details that they show, expressing that they really knew what they were doing to a certain degree. Yeah, so I mean, it's just we are not really taking the second half too seriously, because it didn't take itself too seriously, I think. It's still that I hope it comes across that there are still some things strewn into the plot we really liked in the second half.
Yeah. Also, maybe I wasn't even that, not negative, but I wasn't even that worried about the second part. It was definitely not nearly as strong as the first part.
No,
definitely,
not in this.
There were many things that I really didn't like about it. But again, when you listen to survivors of volcanic eruptions, they often have very weird stories, which itself kind of seemed like a movie itself. So sometimes these things can happen. There are cases where people try to drive away from, foreshadowing or spoiling here, pyroclastic clouds or something like that with their cars, and kind of luckily survived in those very certain circumstances. These things, of course, happen, but it's still often very weird to see this in a movie because very stereotypical.
I mean, we are getting into the final part of the plot, because this is pretty fitting, I think. Because then they leave the Dante's Peak base, and the volcano blows up. Do you want to explain what happens? Because once again, you know more about these things than I do.
Yeah, so it is actually not maybe common, but it definitely can happen that volcanoes have more than one eruption in very short periods of time. So that's possible. And what you see is that now there's actually a much larger eruption, and like the whole top of the volcano is exploding, basically. Which I think is heavily based on the Mount St. Helens eruption, because that's exactly what happened there. And this actually happened in many other scenarios thousands of years ago, so we know of these things. So what happens is basically the whole top is exploding. This was a much larger eruption, and what we see now, if this is what you meant, is the pyroclastic flow.
Exactly.
So at one point, the eruption column, is just collapsing in itself. And with that, now you have material which is 1,000 degrees, up to 1,000 degrees Celsius hot, moving with speeds of, this is these things are basically an shock wave, an sound wave. So they're moving with several hundred meters per second, with several up to 1,000 degrees Celsius in temperature, full of ash and rocks and everything that they will, kick in front of them. And they will just move down the hills, they move down valleys. They will stop only if the topography is like, they get the energy from moving down the hill. So if there is not enough kinetic energy, so there's no topography, or the topography rises again, then these things will eventually slow down. But these are really dangerous. And I've really liked how it looked in the movie, actually.
Yeah. Great, you did exactly what I expected you to do.
Nice.
Yeah, but the point is you could not outrun or outdrive this.
No.
No chance.
Yeah, I mean, there are actually people that survived them by driving away with a car because
Oops.
they started really early on, you know.
Okay.
And as I said, you know, they moved down valleys. So if you get high enough in a short period of time, you actually can survive these things. So there are volcanic eruptions where we have people that survive by driving away with a car because they're really lucky.
Yeah.
And they were really lucky in the movie too, so...
Yeah. This is where this quarry comes in, which I mentioned early on. You know, in the beginning, they picked up the son of Rachel, who was playing in this abandoned quarry with other kids. And this is just the abandoned quarry they now use for shelter. Harry drives in there, and this is how they escape this pyroclastic flow. Which is, I mean, you sounded pretty optimistic that this would work. I didn't know whether this could work. I was skeptical, but I don't know.
I mean, of course, it's really lucky. Really, really, really lucky. And in most of the scenarios, you would not survive. But we have these cases where people were just really, really lucky. Yeah. So, of course, it's like they're always lucky in a movie. They survive all these things. So that's what makes it kind of ludicrous at some point. But itself, of course, is dramatic. You know, it's very dramatic in a movie. But it is, I think it is possible. So people did survive that before. Yeah. And I guess so. That's why I think that's actually not even that unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was skeptical. I was like, come on, yeah, you know, we've seen that these people have plot armor to no end, but this is ludicrous. But then again, thinking about it, I don't know, this sounds like a story, maybe not the whole part with driving into there with a car, but in general, just seeking shelter quickly in an abandoned mine. I don't know, it just rang like a real story to me, something that you would actually see as this, you know, miracle survivors of this deadly event. I don't know whether it makes sense the way I explain it, but it didn't.
Yeah, I know what I said.
Yeah, it didn't sound as weird as I first thought.
Yeah.
But yeah,
for example, this volcano in South America that erupted some 100 years ago, and then a pyroclastic storm just wiped out the whole city. But one guy survived, and he was in a prison, and a prison was sheltered.
Yeah. I remember.
He actually survived. Yeah. So you know, these things can happen, but of course it's a bit ridiculous because in the movie they survive all these things, and at some point it's just gets more and more unlikely.
Yeah. But this is where our movie ends. Basically, it's our protagonists are caught in this mine because some part of the mine collapses and prevents them from escaping. But luckily, Harry got the elf device, the extra long frequency sending machine thing. Yeah, and he goes to pick it up from the car. We need to say that there was another second cave-in when he was on his way there, but in the end he reached it, he activated it. It was another point where I was like, hey, it would take days for help to arrive and to dig them out, but the movie is just like, yeah, everything is fine now. Happy end. They get saved, they get rescued, and they lived happy ever after.
But I mean, I think they said that they were in there like some days or...
No, I don't know.
I thought that I'm actually not sure about it anymore, but I thought that it was somewhere mentioned that some days actually passed.
What did they drink or eat?
I mean, in the kids and the woman, they were in this small shelter room, and there was food at least. I don't know if there was water, but at least there was some food.
Possibly could be, yeah.
Yeah, it was mentioned because the kids, the boy, he stored some of his sweets and stuff in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and he probably doesn't had anything to eat and drink. I mean, rocks were lying on him. He couldn't move or anything, and his leg or his arm was broken. I mean, there was even a bone coming out from his arm. Yeah. I mean, I guess you can survive that, but he should have been like really devastated after that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. You can survive a couple of days without water, food even longer, but yeah, I mean, this is where the movie actually just was like, let's skip to the next scene. They're rescued, and what was weird was that it was this Jurassic Park-esque ending, where everybody gets into the helicopter, flies away, the kids, the adults, and I was hoping for pterosaurs to accompany the helicopter out of the valley, but yeah.
Yeah. I think the end was kind of cringy. I mean, in reality, when people are dragged out of college buildings, then everybody is clapping and stuff. So yeah, this happens really. But just like they're coming out and they're like hundreds of people there and all completely hyped and clapping and stuff like that. I just found it was cringe. But
and plus a remark my girlfriend made was, and I didn't catch this, but she was exactly right, I think. The focus of this whole movie completely shifts in the last third, because at no point is it about the population anymore. It's just about our protagonists being safe, and the end of the movie also doesn't concern the eruption or the consequences or anything. It's just this, they lived happy ever after, and nobody ever talks about Dante's Peak again. Nobody cares about Dante's Peak again.
It shifted to their personality, like to the people themselves.
Yeah, the focus was just shifted. I didn't catch that. She said that, and yeah, she was right, I think. Yeah, but conclusions. What do you think?
I liked the movie, even if in the end it was, even if in the end we like kind of make fun of it. But I really liked the movie because it surprised me. It's definitely not one of my favorite movies, but it surprised me. I liked it because of the first half was scientifically very accurate in many ways. It was very detailed. And I guess they had real scientists that helped them with the movie. And then when the volcano erupts, they wanted to have more action, so they kind of shifted their priorities from, like, and tried to follow more the plot and not the science in some ways. So then there are certainly aspects of the science that are wrong. But in the end, I think it's actually one of the movies, one of some, Hollywood action movie that actually followed the science really strongly. And maybe, I don't know if in any movie right now, which I would have thought, which I know that it did a similar thing and really tried to follow the science. So, yeah, definitely had its problems, but in the end, I liked it.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything you just said. It surprised me. I was going into this thinking, alright, trashy nature disaster movie from the 90s. And when they started to actually not only mention some actual scientific methods and facts, but when they also started to show the work the volcanologists did and showed that they meant this seriously, that they actually knew what volcanology is all about. Yeah, it surprised me positively, and despite the fact that we made fun of the second half, I mean, the second half that was just there for people who were waiting for the action. And I think...
and there were still some good things in it.
Yeah,
You know?
there were aspects in that, like, you know, air traffic being jammed because of the volcanic ash. Uh, Little things like these, the lahar caused by
The
the
pyroclastic
eruption.
flow.
Yeah. It was still orienting itself on reality. And you need these action scenes to keep people into this. I mean, it's a disaster movie. People are calling for exciting stuff to go down, and yeah. So, yeah, not really one of my favorite movies either. Not one of the best movies ever made. But honestly, at least in part, one of the better disaster movies I know.
Yeah. What I actually liked is many of these movies, then the science explanation, you know, when a scientist tries to explain what is happening, this often doesn't make any sense, and he's just saying smart, you know, words that sound smart. But in
Yeah,
this
exactly.
case, they used real evidence, they used real things, they didn't simplify it too strongly, actually, and this was quite surprising.
And I think you can definitely feel that Mount St. Helens was still very much in the mind of everybody involved. I mean, they mention this eruption about 1,000 times in the movie. It's pretty obvious that it was in their minds and that all of this was pretty much modeled after the events of Mount St. Helens. But yeah, also in general, it was. I mean, people tend to make movies about things that move them, and I think that you could really feel that this was, even 15 years later, still pretty much in the minds of people as one of the most surprising and catastrophic eruptions, maybe in the Western world at that time.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
why wouldn't it be,
The
of
strongest
course?
news history, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was pretty interesting. Just, I don't know. As I said, they mention it again and again and again. But I've just found it interesting because I truly had the feel that this was some kind of, yeah, maybe dealing with the happenings from back then, trying to, yeah, you know, with many movies based or inspired on real life events, it's some kind of rethinking the events and trying to distill the essential message, the essential thing we should learn from this event for the afterworld, for the world after this disaster. And in this case, yeah, maybe we should. The basic message was we should react quicker. We should be more careful, and we should not wait until we take measures. We should start to make plans immediately as soon as there is the risk of something happening, something catastrophic happening. And this should have happened maybe. I don't know too much about the Mount St. Helens situation. I don't know uh, whether people didn't react properly, but it seems like it if I would only judge it from this movie. And I will certainly research more about Mount St. Helens, and maybe we can even do an episode in the future on Mount St. Helens.
Oh yeah, that's actually on my list.
Yeah, that's
Funny.
a good idea, huh?
Yeah, so the eruption, the problem was that it was just difficult to, even for the scientists to know, you know,
It was difficult to predict.
Yeah, right. Difficult to predict, yeah.
But do you know whether there was actually any kind of discussion about whether people didn't react quickly enough? I mean, it was just a difficult situation, wasn't it?
I mean, these discussions you would basically have always after that, you know, people were not reacting,
Yeah.
so why did they not react?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I think I have to go into more detail of that maybe read through some things again in the case of Mount St. Helens, which is a very interesting eruption.
Yeah, I would say.
But yeah, let's make an episode about it, actually.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was thinking. That should be on our list, and maybe in the near future even.
Yeah.
Okay, so remarks? Anything?
I think I'm fine. I liked the episode. I really liked it. I liked our discussion. I liked the topic. So I'm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this more open format.
Yeah.
All right, so then I think this was our review of Dante's Peak. Neither of us has a new favorite movie after that. We both were positively surprised, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, and we'll hear each other in the next episode then, shortly after Christmas. Have a nice holiday. And stay at home if possible.
Exactly. So then, until the next time, guys.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the RockyTerrain podcast. If you enjoyed listening to us, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Everything addressed in this podcast reflects our own opinion. You can contact us at 4.5GAinthemaking@gmail.com. That is 4.5GAinthemaking@gmail.com. All music used is from Kevin MacLeod and was downloaded from filmmusic.io under the Creative Commons license. That is Heavy Interlude for intro and outro, and Home Bass Groove for intermission.
Have you guys ever tried Estwing hammers? We need a sponsor. We need a sponsor. So try Estwing. We need Estwing as a sponsor. Estwing.
Should I not cut it at the end of the podcast? Yeah, the outtakes for this time.
Maybe.